Alright, as promised, this is a continuation of programs on the calculator with some discussion then of the programming that goes underneath. Once again, I caution you, I am not a programmer. I do know, however, that conversion is something we should be able to do, and if we can't, we must carry a program with us to remind us that conversion is something we need to do. Conversion is usually solved by multiplying by 1, except when there is a datum shift, as in temperature or pressure, which are both actually related, or in terms of elevation between two vertical datum. So I have the program running here. We're going to turn that on, and we're going to first look at the CK check pressure for Captain Carl. And I'm going to look at the editing of the program before we go through it. You notice here we start with a disclaimer, pause, which to the calculator tells us it will go on when you hit the enter button. In this case, I do not say press enter to continue. It's kind of implied. Clearing the screen, putting a variable into a 0 into the variable f. And then here, the most kind of important statement for you to see is that making a list called pval for pressure values, giving it a dimension of 6. In other words, a list of 6 things. And then putting 1 into the first occurrence of the list for atmosphere, 760 for millimeters of mercury, 14.7 per psi, 33.9 for feet of water, 2116.8 for pounds per square foot, and then 101.35 for kilopascals, all being equal to atmospheric pressure. From there, I asked the question, from what units are you going? In other words, absolute or gauge. I receive the value and then enter the value to convert, that is the numerical value, and then goes through some if statements. This is actually an example here. There's not enough in these programs of a check on input statement where if in fact if the user has said that it is absolute pressure and the pressure is less than there, that is an impossibility and it gives an error. It then goes on and asks for what are the units of the input and gives you the choice 1 through 6. This would be, all of these places are places that you could very easily change the program to use some sort of menu there for your selection of which value you want. Goes through, asks the units that you want to convert to, once again absolute or gauge. Tells you whether or not there's a datum shift, so you realize that it is something that you want to learn how to do. You should learn to start to be able to visualize pressure just like you can visualize climbing up a hill on your bicycle. It goes through and asks you the 2 units with the same sort of input, and then goes through the datum shift if necessary and the conversion before actually putting everything to the output of the screen. In this case, putting it next to the last is your output, and that is not cleaned up, but you should be able to go through. Here it puts the value, the output value, in the last, second to the last place. Now these other ones, these other values can then be used to code here. If you know here, if A is equal to 1, then the output is absolute. That's basically your first input. So that's what the program looks like. Get used to getting inside, looking around, and being able to restore it from your computer if in fact you erase something, which is relatively easy to do in this program, in these programs, because they are not written in assembly. So now to look at how that program looks. This of course was one of the series of exam questions or quiz questions where people repeatedly did not get correct. We need to know that 1 atmosphere pressure is 760 millimeters of mercury, is 33.9 feet of water, and we need to know the relationship usually is based on that shift and then on the specific gravity of the material like mercury or water. So if I hit program here, go to CK pressure, we see how the input works. It has a disclaimer on it. This is the question about what you're converting from. Let's say we're converting from absolute pressure. We enter a 1. Let's say absolutely I'm converting 29.4. I asked that. I put that in there because that's going to be PSI, and it's going to be 2 atmospheres absolute. So we said this is absolute, and I'm going to say it's PSI. That's the from. I want to convert to gauge. It tells me it's a datum shift, and I want to go to atmospheric, and I get an answer right there of 1. That is how the pressure convert program works. I'm going to hit an enter here, and you notice here very often it is not cleared out, so I'm going to hit second clear, second clear, delete, clear, just put a bunch of numbers in to finish out. What happens when you put 9? Just takes nothing because it only tests for 1, and I quit here. So very often these programs are not cleared correctly, but you should be able to figure out a way out of them. Let's look at one more as we got the 10 minutes here. Let's look at the program here. The other things that are on there: check water, gives you some basic information about water. These are all just examples of view to store, kind of ways to store notes. Check units. This is a little bit more substantial there. You should start adding to this. One thing that I will add is that 1 cubic meter of water is 1,000 kilograms, 1 liter of water is 1 kilogram, and 1 milliliter of water is 1 gram. That is something that you shouldn't have to have, but it is information that is incredibly necessary as you progress through engineering. You have some basis when you're using specific gravities. Hit the clear there. Program. We talked about coordinate convert, flow graph. Geology is an example of how to go about and enter notes. You notice one thing that does occur: it will always print the graph screen. If you have a function or a stat plot on it, it will always print that along with your text. Program. Kinematic, Manning. The menus here. It's a great idea, and we'll do that soon, to make your menus begin with A, so you don't have to go down to the bottom to get your menus. Moisture content. Weight of the water over weight of the solids. Polar in, Patak unit. Just another example of storing information in a program. Hit clear here. Program. Points to vector takes actually data that's stored in the L1, L2, and L3 as points and converts it to the vector u and v, defined as the vector from L1 to L2 as one vector being u, and the vector from L1 to L3 as the v vector. Remembering points, in fact, are vectors because they are defined by the radial vector from the 0, 0 point to the point in question. Points toggle just gives you that sense of, I'll take a look at that here. Hit program. Sorry, go down to here, points toggle. And edit that. Show you what that looks like. All it does is ask you to go, if you want to go begin with LU to LW or L1 to L3, and then goes to that statement there, setting up the editor to give you one or the other. They both more or less set the editor to do all those things, but it gives you an ability to very quickly get at L1, L2, L3, or LU, LV, or LW. Second quit. Out of time. Finally, W United, looking at that, it converts program. If you look at W United and edit, it just takes list W and divides by the magnitude of list W, converting it to a unit vector.